All right, question 1. The passage sets out London's success in attracting people and firms, then piles up evidence that property costs, both residential and commercial, have soared, squeezing renters, worrying businesses, and slowing productivity. All of that serves one overarching claim, which arrives at the end. Overpriced property is eroding the economic and human diversity that underpins London's prosperity. That's the thesis the earlier facts are marshaled to support. The other statements about poor housing, renters' disposable income, and business worries are supporting points or intermediate claims, not the main conclusion. So, the best expression of the author's main conclusion is that expensive property is costing London the diversity it needs to prosper, which is option E. All right, question 2. We've got a flat regional tax rate that applies to the whole of each person's income. The task is simply to find who pays the same dollar amount of tax as Tim. Looking at the table, Tim in the north earns $10,000 at 30%. So Tim's tax is $10,000 times 0.30, which is $3,000. Now I'll compute each of the others and compare to $3,000. Neil, $20,000 at 25% gives $20,000 times 0.25 equals $5,000. Not a match. Veronica, $150,000 at 3% gives $150,000 times 0.03 equals $4,500. Not a match. David, $50,000 at 6% gives $50,000 times 0.06 equals $3,000. That matches Tim exactly. Amy, $80,000 at 5% gives $80,000 times 0.05 equals $4,000. Not a match. Roz, $12,000 at 30% gives $12,000 times 0.30 equals $3,600. Not a match. Only David lands on the same $3,000. So the answer is C, David, because his income rate combination yields the same tax as Tim's. All right, question 3. We're told that elite athletes all show very high self-discipline, sustained over years of grueling training. From that, the passage proposes a policy idea. Put more young people into athlete-style training programs, and they'll develop the same exceptional discipline for their studies. The hinge is whether the training causes the discipline. The argument assumes the discipline is produced by doing the training, rather than being the prerequisite that enables someone to persist with it in the first place. If the athletes already had unusually strong self-discipline before they committed to years of repetition and pain, then copying the training regime won't necessarily manufacture that trait in the general student population. That's the classic confusion of cause and effect. Notice how the other options don't hit the central misstep. Whether more than discipline is needed to become elite, A, is beside the point. Whether there are other ways to build discipline, B, doesn't undercut this particular claim. Access to top coaching, C, is a feasibility gripe, not a logical flaw. And life success after school, D, is irrelevant. The core flaw is the causal assumption. So the best answer is E. The strong self-discipline may not be an effect of the training, but a pre-existing capacity. All right, question 4. The passage strings together a consistent pattern. Younger people are drinking and using drugs less, and serious problems with alcohol and drugs are rarer among them. By contrast, people in their 40s are most likely to be admitted to hospital for alcohol. A rising share of heroin addicts are over 40. Middle-aged men make up a growing slice of the prison population. And suicide is falling among the young, but rising among middle-aged men. So, what's the safest conclusion? We want something that captures this age shift without overreaching. Option A says young people have far fewer health problems overall. That's too broad. The evidence is about specific social harms, not health in general. Option B states that some social problems are increasingly problems of middle-aged people. That neatly summarizes the cited trends and stays within the evidence. Option C implies a causal link between drinking and crime. The passage never makes that connection. Option D claims drink, drugs, and suicide are the biggest killers of middle-aged people. No ranking of causes of death is given. Option E predicts young people will develop harmful behaviors later. That's a speculative leap. The data don't justify it. So the warranted conclusion is B, because it matches the observed shift without adding claims the passage doesn't support. Alright, question 5. We've got an argument contrasting two eras. In the past, teachers were remembered fondly for preparing pupils for life, not merely exams. Now, the claim goes, teaching is exam-focused, and teachers don't model adult life, so children today get a less valuable education. What's the author assuming to make that leap? The conclusion is that today's education is less valuable. The stated reason is the shift from life preparation to exam preparation. For that to hold, we need the bridge, that education oriented to life, teachers as exemplars of adulthood, is more valuable than education focused on exam performance. Without that value judgment, the conclusion doesn't follow. Let's test the options quickly. A says education for life is of greater value than merely passing exams. Yes, that's exactly the missing plank that makes the conclusion go through. B, adults remember only the good parts. That's about memory bias, not the value of education. C, many young people have higher ambitions than becoming like their teachers, irrelevant to whether teacher modeling is valuable. D, exam results are vital keys to education and livelihood. If anything, that would undermine the conclusion by raising the value of exam focus. E, it's more satisfying for teachers to be role models. Teacher satisfaction isn't the point. The argument is about the value to students. So the necessary assumption is A. That's the premise that turns the descriptive change in teaching into a judgment about diminished value. Final answer, A, because the argument presupposes that life-oriented education is more valuable than exam-focused education.
Isn't he great? Arthur's your very own Oxbridge tutor, built by real tutors who've guided hundreds of applicants into Oxford and Cambridge. He doesn't just know what makes a good candidate, he knows what makes an exceptional one. You've already learned from him here. Imagine what happens when he's guiding you directly. Interview slots fill quickly before the season starts, so don't wait. Book your session now at arthurtutoring.co.uk.
All right, question 6. We've got the Canadian flag in grayscale. 2 red side strips, a white square in the middle, and a red maple leaf centered in that square. The diagram underneath marks the widths as 1, 2, 1, and we're told the white square is twice the width of a red strip. The leaf occupies a quarter of the square. We want the overall ratio of red to white area on the whole flag. First instinct might be to fiddle with the widths 1, 2, 1, but area is what matters, not just width. So let's model it cleanly. Let the width of a single red strip be W. Then the white center is a square of side 2W, which also means the flag's height is 2W. Now, areas. Each red side strip has area W times 2W equals 2W squared. 2 of them make 4W squared. The maple leaf is red as well, and its area is 1/4 of the central square. The square's area is 2W squared equals 4W squared. So the leaf contributes 1W squared. Total red area, 4W squared strips plus 1W squared leaf equals 5W squared. White area is the remainder of the central square after the leaf is cut out. 4W squared minus 1W squared equals 3W squared. So the ratio red-white is 5W squared times 3W squared, which simplifies neatly to 5 to 3. That lands us on option D. Final answer, D, because the 2 red panels plus a quarter square leaf give 5 parts red to 3 parts white. All right, question 7. We've got a table of students with a first examiner and mark, a second examiner and mark, and the final mark is just the average. We're asked, which pair of examiners disagreed the most on a single student's mark? The efficient way is to scan each row and compute the absolute difference between the two marks. Then note which examiner pair produced the largest gap. Looking at the table, I run down the rows. Arnold Jones, 80 versus 70. A 10-point gap, Rosenberg versus Robson. Betty Markham, 90 versus 60. That's 30. Kettering versus DeVere. Clara Bird, 60 versus 50. 10. Nolan versus Robson. Cora Smith, 80 and 80. 0. Kettering versus Rosenberg. Dave Howard, 90 and 90. 0. DeVere versus Rosenberg. Dennis Garton, 80 and 70. 10. Kettering versus Nolan. Hillary Gordon catches the eye. 50 versus 90. A 40-point gap, Robson versus DeVere. Janine Turner, 80 versus 90. 10. Rosenberg versus Nolan. Lawrence Rothman, 60 versus 50. 10. Nolan versus DeVere. The largest of those is clearly the 40-point disagreement on Hillary Gordon between Mr. Robson and Mrs. DeVere. Cross-check the options. That's option E. So the answer is E, because that pair shows the biggest single discrepancy in awarded marks, larger than the next biggest, the 30-point gap for Betty Markham. All right, question 8. We have a bar chart showing numbers of standard and premium tickets sold on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Premium tickets are more expensive than standard tickets, and we're asked which night could have produced the highest total sales income. Looking at the chart, my immediate impression is that Saturday sold the most tickets overall. A very tall standard bar, about 300, and a smaller premium bar, about 125. Friday has fewer total tickets, but a lot of premiums, roughly 150 standard and 225 premium. And Thursday is roughly 200 standard and 150 premium. Now think about income. Let S be the standard price and P the premium price, with P greater than S. We compare incomes. Thursday, 200S plus 150P. Friday, 150S plus 225P. Saturday, 300S plus 125P. A quick elimination. Could Thursday be highest? For Thursday to beat Friday, you'd need 200S plus 150P greater than 150S plus 225P, which simplifies to 50S greater than 75P, or P less than 2/3 S. So Thursday cannot be the top. So it's between Friday and Saturday. Compare Friday minus Saturday. 150S plus 225P minus 300S plus 125P equals minus 150 equals 52P minus 3S. If 2P is greater than 3S, i.e. P over 7, then Friday brings more revenue. If P over 7 is less than 1.5, then Saturday does. Both are consistent with P greater than S. So the highest income could have been Friday or Saturday, depending on how much more premium tickets cost. Final answer, E. The highest total sales income could have been for Friday or Saturday. All right, question 9. We're given a passage that moves from lots of teens text, their grammar and spelling are poor, employers complain, and then cites one school where banning phones was followed by improved English scores. Therefore, all schools should ban phones. The argumentative hinge is the jump from scores improved after the ban to the ban caused the improvement, and then generalizing that to all schools. That's the classic correlation-causation misstep. Many other factors could have driven the improvement. The other options are red herrings. There's no statistical flaw about the 72% versus a third that drives the conclusion. The conclusion isn't texting is inappropriate, so C and D miss the mark. And employment requirements, E, aren't the key logical link. The core flaw is assuming the ban caused the improvement. So the best answer is B. It assumes that because test scores improved after the ban, the improvement was due to the ban. Alright, question 10. We're told that when women's code suggestions are anonymous, 72% are accepted. But when their gender is known, acceptance drops to 63%. The argument takes this as evidence of prejudice against women's coding ability and concludes the tech sector must counter factors inhibiting gender equality. To weaken that, I'm looking for an alternative explanation for the drop that isn't specific to anti-female bias. Something like a general penalty when any contributor's gender is revealed. Let's scan the options. A talks about female users rejecting others' code more than men do. That's about who rejects, not whether women's work gets accepted, so it doesn't address the causal claim. B is about firms' initiatives, interesting socially, but irrelevant to the study's inference. C says there were no meaningful differences between the code by women who reveal gender and those who didn't. That actually strengthens the bias claim, because it rules out quality as a confounder. D about Ada Lovelace's education is historical color, but has no bearing on the study's mechanism. E says male contributors also experienced a similar drop in acceptance when their gender was revealed. That's the key weakening point. If everyone's acceptance falls upon gender revelation, the effect may be due to identity disclosure generally, perhaps signaling outgroup, provoking bias against identified profiles, or simply changing review behavior, rather than prejudice specifically against women's abilities. It undercuts the argument's attribution of the drop to anti-female bias. So the best weakening option is E. Alright, question 11. The passage builds from a duty of schools to support well-being, notes that many students dislike competitive sport, and points out that there are physical activities without competition. It then says schools should offer these as alternatives to traditional games. Further support comes from the idea that many don't keep up sport after school, yet fitness remains important for adult life, so offering attractive, non-competitive options could help. Non-competitive activities helps prepare students for life beyond school. All of that functions as premises and context. The sentence about what schools should do, offering non-competitive alternatives, is the claim they're trying to establish. The other statements are supporting reasons, not the main point. So the main conclusion is that schools should offer non-competitive alternatives to traditional games lessons. That's option D. Alright, question 12. Two rear bike lamps, both flashing, and they're switched on together. One does 1 second on, 1 second off. The other does 2 seconds on, 2 seconds off. We're asked, in each minute, for how many seconds are both dark. No diagram here. This is a rhythm problem. The trick is periodicity. The first lamp has a 2-second cycle, the second a 4-second cycle, so the combined pattern repeats every 4 seconds. Let's look at one 4-second window starting at the moment they're switched on. In seconds 0 to 4, lamp A, 1 on, 1 off, is off during 1 to 2 and 3 to 4. Lamp B, 2 on, 2 off, is off during 2 to 4. Where are both off together? The overlap of those off intervals is only 3 to 4. That's exactly 1 second of complete darkness per 4-second cycle. Boundaries, like the instant at 2 seconds, don't contribute any time, so we can ignore them. Now scale up to a minute. 60 seconds is 15 4-second cycles. 15 cycles times 1 second of total darkness per cycle gives 15 seconds per minute when neither lamp is shining. So the best answer is C, 15 seconds, using periodicity and overlapping intervals to avoid any brute force counting. Alright, question 13. We've got a little table comparing 5 commuter routes. Each shows the journey length in kilometers and the monthly season ticket cost as a percentage of average wages. The question asks, on which route do commuters spend the lowest proportion of their wages per kilometer? So we're after a rate, percentage of wages per kilometer. My first instinct is to divide cost by distance for each row. But that's fiddly decimals. A neat flip is to compare the number of kilometers you get for 1% of wages. That's length divided by cost. The route that buys you the most kilometers per 1% will have the lowest cost per kilometer. Looking at the table, Luton, London, 56 kilometers and 14%. 56 divided by 14 equals 4 kilometers per 1%. Not promising. Brandenburg, Berlin, 69 over 8. 8 into 64 is 8 with a bit left over. Call it about 8.6 kilometers per 1%. Paris, Helsinki, 75 over 6. 6 into 72 is 12. 3 left. So 12.5 kilometers per 1%. Very good. Uppsala, Stockholm, 72 over 6 equals 12 kilometers per 1%. Just behind Paris. Drogheda, Dublin, 36 over 5 equals 9.2 kilometers per 1%. Respectable, but not the best. So the most kilometers per 1% of wages is Paris, Helsinki at 12.5, narrowly beating Uppsala, Stockholm at 12. That means Paris, Helsinki has the lowest proportion of wages per kilometer. Therefore, the answer is C, Paris, Helsinki. All right, question 14. We've 2 little scatter plots, one for market price against age, the other for max speed against size, each showing car 1 and car 2. First plot, age on the x-axis, market price on the y. Car 2 sits up and to the left of car 1. Up means more expensive, left means younger. So car 2 is both pricier and newer. Car 1 is cheaper and older. Second plot, size on the x-axis, max speed on the y. Car 2 is again up and to the right of car 1. So car 2 is bigger and faster. Car 1 is smaller and slower. Now, let's test the statements, looking for the one that's not correct. A. The more expensive car is newer. More expensive is car 2, and we've said it's younger. That holds. B. The cheaper car is bigger. Cheaper is car 1, but car 1 is to the left and lower on the size speed plot. So it's smaller, not bigger. That looks wrong. Keep it in mind. C. The older car is slower. Older is car 1. On the speed axis, it's lower than car 2, so slower. True. D. The newer car is bigger. Newer is car 2. It's to the right on size. Bigger. True. E. The slower car is smaller. Slower is car 1, also smaller. True. So only B contradicts the diagrams. Final answer, B, because the cheaper car, car 1, is actually smaller, not bigger. All right, question 15. We've got a passage describing a natural flood management scheme, leaky dams in the hills, an upstream flood storage reservoir, plus trees and heather restoration acting like a sponge. The result was a 15 to 20% reduction in peak river flow, credited about half to land management and half to the storage area. Then we're told these measures also improve water quality, prevent erosion, and sometimes store carbon. Now, we're looking for a conclusion that follows from this. Option A claims the reduction would be insufficient in very heavy rain. Speculative. The passage doesn't discuss extreme rainfall thresholds. Option C says all methods are equally effective. No, the passage splits impact between 2 broad categories, but doesn't claim equality across all methods. Option D recommends universal rollout, policy overreach, not supported by the evidence given. Option E says these methods are most effective in hilly uplands. This scheme happened in hills, but there's no comparative claim. Option B says the benefits go beyond reducing flood risk. That is explicitly supported by the final sentence. Water quality, erosion prevention, carbon storage. So the defensible conclusion is B. Final answer? B, because the passage directly states additional benefits beyond flood reduction.
Isn't he great? Arthur's your very own Oxbridge tutor, built by real tutors who've guided hundreds of applicants into Oxford and Cambridge. He doesn't just know what makes a good candidate, he knows what makes an exceptional one. You've already learned from him here. Imagine what happens when he's guiding you directly. Interview slots fill quickly before the season starts, so don't wait. Book your session now at arthurtutoring.co.uk.
All right, question 16. The passage argues that the government should abandon a planned fuel tax increase. The stated reason for the tax is to meet carbon emissions targets, but the passage counters with economic harms. Motorists already hit by big rises, households facing higher prices and inflation, and the government enjoying a windfall from high oil prices. For the conclusion must abandon the tax increase to follow, the reasoning has to prioritize those economic impacts over the environmental objective. In other words, it assumes that the hit to people's pockets and inflation matters more than the emissions goal. Otherwise, the original rationale could still justify the tax. That's exactly what option A captures. The others introduce claims that aren't required. We don't need to believe fuel costs must be reduced, only that they shouldn't rise further, nor that emissions are the only possible justification, nor that companies would go bust, nor that the government must use North Sea revenues to cut taxes. The key hidden hinge is the ranking of priorities. Economic costs trump the emissions target here. Hence, A. All right. Question 17. The passage piles up a series of correlations. Married people are healthier, wealthier, happier, and then leaps to the prescriptive conclusion that pursuing marriage is worthwhile. The vulnerable point is the implied causation. Is marriage producing these outcomes, or are people with those advantages simply more likely to marry? So what would most weaken it? Evidence of selection bias. Option E. Wealthier couples are 4 times more likely to marry than poorer couples, directly suggests that pre-existing wealth helps drive marriage, rather than marriage generating wealth. If the pool of married people is disproportionately well off to begin with, many of the observed benefits could be artifacts of who marries, not what marriage does. The other options either reinforce benefits, A, C, are too vague to undercut the causal leap, B, or shift the discussion to quality within marriage without addressing the marriage versus single comparison, D. The cleanest undermining of the reasoning is E, so I'd go with E, because it undercuts the causal inference by introducing a strong confounder, selection by wealth. All right, question 18. 3 runners on the same track, each with a steady lap time. Alec does 3 minutes, Barry 5, Colin 6. We're asked when they next all hit the start line together, how many more laps has Alec done than Barry? The key is not to simulate lap by lap, it's to find the moment they're all back together, which happens at the least common multiple of their lap times. Looking at those numbers, 3, 5, and 6, the LCM takes the highest powers of the primes involved, 2, 3, and 5. Multiplying gives 2 times 3 times 5 equals 30 minutes. So after 30 minutes, Alec, 30 divided by 3 equals 10 laps. Barry, 30 divided by 5 equals 6 laps. Colin, for completeness, 30 divided by 6 equals 5 laps. The question only wants the gap between Alec and Barry. 10 minus 6 equals 4. So Alec has completed 4 more laps by the time they all reconvene at the start line. That's the tidy benefit of using the LCM, rather than plodding through the timeline. Answer B, 4. All right, question 19. We've a table of 20 countries with recycling in thousands of tons for years 1, 2, and 3. The question is simply, what's the biggest percentage increase from year 1 to year 3? Looking at this table, I'll scan for small year 1 values that rise a lot by year 3. Percentages are driven by small bases. Ambrosia, 52 to 65. That's about a quarter, 25%. Buranda, 60 to 80, roughly 33%. Carbonda catches the eye, 20 to 40. That's a neat doubling, 100%. Tempting to jump to option C there, but let's keep scanning. The trick is to spot any tripling. Elbonia, 32 to 40, again about 25%. Friponia, 36 to 45, 25%. Grandia, 20 to 60, that's from 20 up by 40, which is 2 times the original added to it, so it's tripled overall. A tripling from 20 to 60 is a 200% increase, not 100%. So that beats Carbonda. Check a few more in case anything rivals it. Kilumpa, 40 to 70 is 75%. Nalofa, 32 to 48 is 50%. The rest are gentle climbs. Moodle even dips a bit year 2 to 3, but we only care year 1 to 3. No one else triples. Given the options, 50, 75, 100, 150, 200. The largest we've seen is that tripling for Grandia, which corresponds to 200%. So the correct choice is E. So final answer, E, because Grandia goes from 20 to 60, a 200% increase. The little move here was scanning for small baselines and spotting a tripling rather than stopping at the first doubling. Look at the block as a 3x2 plan. 3 positions left-right, 2 positions front-back, with 2 heights, the low continuous slab and 3 taller vertical pieces. From the isometric, you can see which plan cells are tall. The tall pieces are at front left, back middle, and back right. The low continuous part is at front middle and front right, and the remaining back left is part of the low slab. Because we are looking through transparent glass, any face view is simply a projection of that height pattern. Option E asks for a view with a small rectangular notch centered at the top edge above a single, clean horizontal join across the middle of the picture. To make that picture, you would need 2 tall pieces standing one on each side of the notch, symmetrically placed about the center line, with a low block occupying the whole lower half behind them. But in the actual object, the tall pieces are not symmetrically placed about the center of that face. They are at front left, back middle, and back right. So you cannot get a centered top notch with a single continuous low half behind it. Any face that shows a top center notch will also show the asymmetry, an extra tall element either to the left or to the right, or a break in the lower half. So E's perfectly centered notch over an uninterrupted lower half cannot come from this block. Hence, E is impossible. Alright, question 21. The passage praises conservation tourism in Africa. Employment, wealth, education, saving species, and then infers we should welcome tourism in the Arctic, even large cruise ships, because tourists will leave better informed. The key issue is the leap from one context to another, as if the benefits transfer automatically. That's a classic overgeneralization. Success in Africa's conservation-oriented tourism doesn't guarantee similar outcomes for Arctic cruise tourism, which could be very different in scale, impact, and management. Calling critics unfair and asserting that tourists will be better informed doesn't bridge that gap. The argument needs evidence that Arctic tourism functions like Africa's conservation models and actually benefits conservation there. Looking at the options, B and C misstate the author's assumptions. E says something the argument doesn't imply at all. D introduces an extra claim about tourists becoming committed, which the passage doesn't assert. It only says better informed. So the best description of the flaw is A. It generalizes from a single domain's success to a universal rule, then applies it to a quite different case. So the flaw is a hasty generalization, weak analogy from Africa to the Arctic. Final answer, A. All right, question 22. The core structure is if unlawful, then resign. He resigned, therefore he was unlawful. That's the classic affirming the consequent. If you, then are, therefore you. It looks persuasive, but it's invalid. The resignation could have happened for other reasons. So we're hunting for an option with exactly that flawed form. Option A, if king cobra, then dead. She's alive, so not a king cobra. That's modus tollens, valid, not our match. Option B, if yellow markings, then pit viper. It had yellow markings, so pit viper. That's modus ponens, also valid, not it. Option C, if rattlesnake, then danger. There are no rattlesnakes, so safe. That's denying the antecedent, not are, therefore not danger. Invalid, but not the same error. Option D, if untreated too long, then complications. I got prompt treatment, so no complications. Again denying the antecedent, not T, therefore not C. Wrong form. Option E, if venomous, then inflamed. We see severe inflammation, so venomous. That is affirming the consequent. If V, then I, therefore V. Exactly parallel to the vice president argument. So the best parallel is E. Same invalid move, same shape. Final answer, E, because it mirrors affirming the consequent. Alright, question 23. We've got a classic NIMBY scenario. Not in my backyard. People say, yes, in principle, centers for serious mental health problems are good, but when one is proposed nearby, they resist and suggest it be elsewhere. The author argues we can't return to isolating people in remote areas. So if we truly support the project, we must accept living near and interacting with those it serves. The kicker is practice what you preach. So the underlying principle is, if you endorse a socially beneficial policy that involves some personal inconvenience or cost, you shouldn't object when that cost falls on you. Now, let's test the options. A, if you think sport's tainted, don't buy tickets. That's consistency, yes, but it's not about accepting a burden for a shared good, more a boycott. Doesn't mirror the local inconvenience point. C, parents who think too much screen time is bad shouldn't buy gadgets. Again, behavioral consistency, but not the structure of support the general good, accept the personal cost. It's more, don't be complicit. D, vegetarians should try to persuade others. That's advocacy, not accepting a personal cost that follows from one's principle. E, those who've benefited from grants should lobby for others. That's commendable, but it's pay it forward, not accepting the downside of your own supported policy. B, people who think more money should go to the health service shouldn't complain when their income tax is increased to fund it. Yes, this is spot on. You support the general objective. You accept the personal cost when it comes home to you. That's the same structure as the mental health center's argument. So the best match is B. Final answer, B, because it captures practice what you preach by accepting the personal cost implied by one's endorsed policy. All right, question 24. A 7-segment digital display, and we show the digits 1 to 9 in order. The little diagram reminds us that 1 is just the 2 right-hand vertical segments. So this is the standard A, B, C, D, E, F, G layout with B and C on the right. My first quick thought, and a trap I nearly fell into, is to imagine symmetry and guess the maximum might be 7, because several segments look equally popular. But let's not rely on symmetry. We should count properly. I'll label segments A top, B top right, C bottom right, D bottom, E bottom left, F top left, G middle. Now list which segments each digit uses, the familiar 7-segment patterns for 1 to 9. Tallying across digits 1 to 9 gives A appears on 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 7 times. B appears on 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 7 times. C appears on 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8 times. D appears on 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 6 times. E appears on 2, 6, 8, 3 times. F appears on 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 5 times. G appears on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 7 times. So the highest count is 8. Segment C, the lower right vertical, lights for every digit except 2 and maybe one other. In fact, it's used by all but digit 2. And the lowest is 3. The lower left segment E only lights for 2, 6, and 8. That rules out my initial 7 max hunch. The correct pair is 8 and 3. Final answer, C. Maximum 8, minimum 3. All right, question 25. Sandy needs 4 nights including Saturday. Looking at the table, each hotel lists nightly rates and a small deal column. Grand have a 3-for-2 type deal. Majestic have Saturday if you stay Friday. Palace gives 50% off for stays of 3+ nights. Palms gives the cheapest night free when you stay 4 nights. And Plaza knocks €50 off any 3+ night stay. My immediate plan is to consider 4 consecutive nights that include Saturday. These puzzles normally mean a single stay, not scattered nights. I briefly considered non-consecutive nights. That gave Palace €135, but stopped myself. A hotel booking implies consecutive nights, so I discard that route. Pivot noted. So check each hotel over the 4 possible consecutive blocks that include Saturday. Wed-Sat, Thursday-Sunday, Friday-Monday, Saturday-Tuesday, and apply the deals. Quick runs. Grand's cheapest block is Fry-Mun. 50 plus 60 plus 60 plus 60 equals 230. 3-for-2 frees the €50. Pay €180. Majestic best is Fry-Mun. 40 plus 90 plus 40 plus 40 equals 210. But Friday-Saturday half makes Saturday €45. Total €165. Palace best is Fry-Mun. 50 plus 90 plus 80 plus 60 equals €280, and 50% off everything, 3+ nights, halves that to €140. Palm's best is Thursday-Sunday. 50 plus 40 plus 60 plus 50 equals €200, with the cheapest €40 free, €160. Plaza best is Thursday-Sunday. 60 plus 50 plus 70 plus 50 equals €230, minus €50, €180. The smallest of those is Palace at €140. So the minimum Sandy will need is €140. Option C. Place labels from the given net. Let T equals the triangular face, O equals the circular ring face, circle with hole, circle equals the solid black circle, square, and plus cross, and the tall rectangular face. From the printed net, we see that T is surrounded by and adjacent to square, plus, O, and circle, and the face opposite T is the tall rectangular face. The cube starts with T facing up. It is then rolled forward along the full path shown. 2 squares to the right, 2 squares down, and 2 more to the right, one face at a time. When you roll forward or sideways, the face that was on top moves to the front or side, the adjacent face becomes the new top, and so on. Tracking carefully through all 6 moves. After the first forward roll, O, the ring, is on top. After the second forward roll, the tall rectangle is on top. After rolling twice downward, the triangle T returns to the top. After the final 2 rolls to the right, the tall rectangle ends up facing up again. So after the complete route, the tall rectangular face is on top. That matches option D. All right, question 27. The passage contrasts a common perception. People link climate action with environmental protection, with the author's claim that the real priority is human welfare. After that, however, we get the thesis. Responding to climate change matters more for humanity than for nature. The rest supports it. Historically, nature adapts to big temperature swings. Human civilizations arose in an unusually stable climate and are vulnerable to disruption. The concluding sentence, nature will find a way, but climate change is potentially devastating for humans, reiterates the evidence and its implication. So the best statement of the main conclusion is the general claim about relative importance, not the illustrative consequence. That makes B the main conclusion. Options A, C, and D are premises or context, and E is a paraphrase of the supporting point, rather than the overarching claim about importance. Final answer, B. Because the passage argues climate response is primarily crucial for humans rather than for the environment. All right, question 28. We've got a passage outlining that chiropractic manipulation brings benefits for some, but more than half of patients experience mild to moderate adverse effects for a few days. And there are documented cases, several hundred, of severe, sometimes fatal strokes linked to upper spine manipulation. Chiropractors sometimes say the pains are necessary on the road to recovery, but the author clearly treats that claim with skepticism. Now, what conclusion follows? A. Ban, option A, is far stronger than anything argued here. The passage reports risks, but doesn't argue policy. C. That the spine is the most delicate body part isn't supported. No comparison with other body parts is made. D. See a doctor first is plausible advice, but not a stated nor implied conclusion of the argument. E. That pain is necessary to healing is actually the claim the author casts doubt upon, given the adverse effects and serious harms. That leaves B. Chiropractic therapy may do more harm than good. The key word is may. The text establishes widespread minor harms and non-negligible severe harms, and doesn't quantify benefits. So the warranted takeaway is a cautious one. Given the evidence, it may do more harm than good. That's precisely the level of claim the passage supports. Probabilistic, not absolute, and critical of the pain is necessary narrative. So I'm happy with B. It matches the evidence and the tone. All right, question 29. We've got an argument worrying that pricey re-education courses for motoring offenses let police forces pad their coffers by setting up speed traps and funneling drivers into courses. The conclusion is, these courses, though good in theory, are open to abuse by cash-starved police. What must be true for that accusation to make sense? If the police can generate easy income, there has to be profit in running the courses. The fees drivers pay must exceed the costs of providing them. Otherwise, there's no net gain to tempt abuse. That's the crux. Let's scan the options. A says the cost of running the courses is less than the fees collected, precisely the condition needed for easy income. That underwrites the whole worry. B, that re-education is more effective than punishment, is irrelevant to whether the scheme is open to abuse. C, that police care more about revenue than safety, is too strong. The argument only needs that they could be tempted, not that it's their top priority. D, offenses tripled, no bearing on the profit mechanism. E, fear of losing a license versus money, again, not necessary for the abuse for income claim. So the necessary assumption is that courses yield a surplus. That's option A. Final answer, A, because profit potential is required for the abuse allegation to hold. All right, question 30. Alex and Sue. 9 cards laid out in a 3x3. Players pick 2 adjacent cards. The first player scores the difference. The second player scores the average. Alex can choose to go first or second and wants to guarantee a win. Looking at the grid, my immediate thought is take the big difference. For example, 1 and 8 have difference 7. That's option A. That looks tempting. But I must check the opponent's reply. If Alex takes 1 and 8, those cards are gone and Sue can choose from the remaining adjacent pairs. Scanning the remaining board, Sue can pick 9 and 7, whose average is 8, which beats Alex's 7. That's the pivot. A large-looking difference can be beaten by a larger average remaining on the board. Let me test the other first move options quickly in the same way. The logic is, for any first pick, difference D, does the second player have some adjacent pair remaining with average greater than D? If yes, going first is unsafe. If Alex took 3 and 9, diff 6, Sue could take 6 and 7, average 6.5, and win. If Alex took 6 and 7, diff 1, she's trivially beaten by many averages, e.g. 3 and 9 average 6. If Alex took 7 and 9, diff 2, Sue could take 8 and 2, average 5, and win. In fact, I skimmed every possible adjacent first move. Whenever 2 cards are removed, there remains at least one adjacent pair whose average is larger than the initial difference. Frequently that killer reply is the 9 and 7 pair, average 8, or the 6 and 7 pair, average 6.5, or similar. In every case, the second player can find an average strictly greater than the first player's difference. So Alex cannot guarantee a win by going first with any of the listed moves, but by choosing to play second, she can always respond to any opening by taking a remaining adjacent pair with an average larger than the opener's difference. Thus, she can force a win. Final answer, play second. Alright, question 31. We have a single ferry that starts each day from the mainland and shuttles to the island. Looking at this calendar, May 1st and May 29 are shaded. Those are the bank holidays. And Saturdays and Sundays use the weekend timetable. The key numbers: each crossing takes 50 minutes. Between crossings, there's a stopover of 10 minutes on normal weekdays and 20 minutes on Saturdays, Sundays, and bank holidays. Operating windows are 9:30 to 16:10 on weekend holidays and 10:30 to 14:20 on normal weekdays. My immediate thought is to turn this into a little inequality. If n is the number of one-way crossings in a day, total time used is n times 50 minutes for crossings plus n-1 stopovers. For weekend holiday days, the stopover is 20, so 50n plus 20, n-1, must be less than the available minutes that day. For 9:30 to 16:10, that's 6 hours 40 minutes, equals 400 minutes. So 50n plus 20n minus 20 is equal to 400. 70n less than 420, n less than 6. So weekends and bank holidays allow at most 6 crossings. For a normal weekday, the stopover is 10 minutes, and the day runs 10:30 to 14:20, equals 3 hours 50 minutes, equals 230 minutes. So 50n plus 10n minus 1 slash 230 equals 60n less than 240, n less than 4. So weekdays allow 4 crossings. Now count the days in May. At first glance, I almost miscounted the weekdays, so I checked the calendar carefully. May 1st is a Monday, and the month has 31 days. So Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays occur 5 times each. Thursdays to Sundays 4 times. That gives 23 Mon-Fry weekdays in total. 2 of those, May 1st and 29, are bank holidays. So there are 21 normal weekdays and 10 weekend holiday days, 8 weekend days plus 2 bank holidays. So total crossings equals 10 days times 6 crossings plus 21 days times 4 crossings equals 60 plus 84 equals 144. That corresponds to option B. Meta skill, scheduling and counting under constraints. Alright, question 32. 20 people voted in March for Andrew, James, and Roger. Then in April, 11 people changed their votes as follows. 3 moved A, 2 moved J, 5 moved A, and 1 moved R, J. I'll talk through it as I mark the charts. First, a quick tidy of the net changes. That saves time. Andrew loses 3 plus 5 equals 8 voters. James gains 3 and 1 but loses 2, so net plus 2. And Roger gains 5 plus 2 but loses 1, so net plus 6. That must hold for every chart. April equals March plus Andrew minus 8, James plus 2, Roger plus 6. Also, March totals sum to 20, and counts must be whole, non-negative numbers. Now I scan the options and check if the white April bars equal the black March bars plus those net moves. Option A. March looks like A10, J5, R5. Applying the shifts gives April A2, J7, R11. And the white bars in A match that. So A is possible. Option B. March appears A12. J equals 7, R equals 1. Shifted A4, J9, R7. The white bars line up with that. So B is possible. Option D, March 11, J2, R7. Shifted A3, J4, R13. The white bars are consistent. So D is possible. Option E, March A10, J8, R2. Shifted A2, J10, R8. The white bars agree. So E is possible. Now C. This is where I pause. The black bars in C look like about A equals 9, J equals 8, R equals 3. They sum to 20. If I apply the net changes, I must have April A equals 1, J equals 10, R equals 9. But the white bars shown in C do not match that pattern. The white James and Roger bars are swapped incorrect heights compared with what the net changes require. In short, the April bars in C cannot be obtained from the March bars by the given transfers. So C is impossible. Final answer, C, the only chart that cannot represent those vote changes. Alright, question 33. We've got an argument saying, if the shopkeepers think it's immoral for Starbucks to avoid UK tax, then it's immoral for them to do the same. And therefore, they should keep paying in full. That's a moral consistency move. Same act, same moral verdict. To weaken it, we need something that shows the two cases aren't morally equivalent. Some relevant difference that undermines the "you can't have it both ways" claim. Option A provides exactly that. The trader's sole purpose is protest, to pressure the government to tackle big business avoidance. That reframes their action as civil disobedience aimed at correcting an injustice, not mere self-enrichment. If intent and context matter morally, the analogy to Starbucks breaks, and the conclusion they should keep paying is weakened. The others don't really touch the core. B forecasts bad macro effects. If anything, that bolsters the conclusion. C questions feasibility, not morality. The argument's about ethics, not whether they can pull it off. D is a general lament about loopholes, irrelevant to the consistency claim. E highlights unfairness in who pays more tax, which may stir sympathy, but it doesn't refute the principle. Believing avoidance is immoral still condemns doing it yourself, unless there's a morally relevant difference, which A supplies. So A most directly weakens the argument by challenging the claimed equivalence. Final answer, A, because it introduces a morally relevant distinction, protest versus profit, that breaks the argument's consistency premise. Alright, question 34. We've got an argument that moves from a correlation. Heavy mobile phone use is associated with cognitive failures and short attention spans, to a prescription. Therefore, to reduce cognitive failures, people should limit phone time. That's a classic leap from correlation to causation. The key question: does the evidence show that phone use causes the cognitive failures? It doesn't. It might be the other way round. People with shorter attention spans could be more drawn to frequent phone use. And those same attention issues could lead to cognitive slips, like forgetting appointments. Let's scan the options. B says limiting usage may not be sufficient to reduce failures. Possible, but the central flaw is earlier in the chain. We haven't established causation at all. C and D are about phone usefulness and varying features, irrelevant to the causal inference. E contrasts driving risks with general overuse, also a red herring. A nails it. Perhaps users already had short attention spans before their phone habits, explaining both the usage and the failures. That directly undercuts the conclusion's causal assumption. So, the flaw is mistaking correlation for causation. The best statement is A. Alright, question 35. We've got a passage that starts by acknowledging the common view. Hypocrisy is bad because it's dishonest. Then the author pivots, saying that pretending to be better than you are shows you still accept the moral standards you've failed to meet, and that this is preferable to being shameless about failings. The key sentence is the one that reframes the whole issue. Perceived in this way, hypocrisy can be considered to be a virtue. That's the author's main move. A reframing from hypocrisy is bad to actually there's a way in which it's good. What follows about hiding embarrassing aspects and the hopeful thought that hypocrites might one day become the people they pretend to be serves as supporting considerations. Those are reasons to accept the reframing, not the central claim itself. Now, which option best captures that overall conclusion? Option D says it is possible to think of hypocrisy as a good thing. That matches the reframing, can be considered to be a virtue. Option C about hypocrisy leading to moral improvement is one of the supporting ideas. Perhaps one day they will succeed. So that's not the main conclusion. Option A is another supporting claim about concealment and shame. Option B criticizes shamelessness. Again, that's a premise. Option E flatly contradicts the author's thrust. So the main conclusion is the reframing. Hypocrisy can be seen as a good thing. In other words, it's possible to think of hypocrisy as a virtue. Therefore, the best answer is D.
Isn't he great? Arthur's your very own Oxbridge tutor, built by real tutors who've guided hundreds of applicants into Oxford and Cambridge. He doesn't just know what makes a good candidate. He knows what makes an exceptional one. You've already learned from him here. Imagine what happens when he's guiding you directly. Interview slots fill quickly before the season starts, so don't wait. Book your session now at arthurtutoring.co.uk.
All right, question 36. Nathan needs 4 identical pieces, and for simplicity, each piece is treated as a 15 centimeter by 38 centimeter rectangle. The table gives 3 fabric widths and prices per meter: 100 centimeters at £2 per meter, 120 centimeters at £2.20 per meter, and 160 centimeters at £2.80 per meter. Lengths can only be bought in exact 10 centimeter multiples. My immediate thought is to see how many pieces fit across the width, and then how much length along the bolt we must buy. There are 2 natural orientations. Place the 15 centimeter side across the width, or rotate and place the 38 centimeter side across the width. If 15 centimeters is across, 100 centimeter width fits 6 across, so all 4 fit in one row. Need 38 centimeter length. Round up to 40 centimeters. Cost 0.4 times £2 equals £80. For 120 centimeters and 160 centimeters, this is even more expensive, so ADP seemed like a candidate. But pause, rotate the pieces. Put the 38 centimeters across the width. 100 centimeters fits 2 across, so 2 rows required. Length 2 times 15 equals 30 centimeters. Cost 0.3 times £2 equals £60. For 120 centimeters, you can fit 3 across, so need 2 rows. 30 centimeters equals 0.3 times £2.20 equals £66. For 160 centimeters, you can fit all 4 across in one row. So you'd need 15 centimeters, but must buy the next 10 centimeter multiple, 20 centimeters, equals 0.2 times £2.80 equals £56. That 56p is the cheapest of all options. I initially leaned to ADP, but rotating the pieces and remembering the 10 centimeter purchase granularity was the pivot. Final answer, B, 56p. All right, question 37. Arthur wants a bath that is 1600 by 700 millimeters, with side grips and, crucially, no pre-drilled tap holes. We're then asked, how much would he save by choosing the cheapest steel bath that fits this spec rather than the cheapest acrylic one? Looking at the table, I'll filter by the three requirements. First, size 1600-700. That immediately knocks out Balmoral, which is 750 wide, and Polar, which is only 1500 long. Next, side grips must be yes. So Dalton fails. I almost like that price at £112, but no side grips. Oporto and Rocca also fail here. Both acrylic with side grips, no. Third, pre-drilled tap holes must be no. That eliminates Gamma and Victory, both with yes. What's left that actually meets all three? Acrylic. Corolla is 1600 × 700. Side grips yes, tap holes no, price £130. That's our only acrylic candidate. Steel. Europa fits at £126, and Sierra also fits at £128. Dalton would have been cheaper, but again, no grips, so out. Cheapest steel among the valid ones is Europa at £126. Cheapest valid acrylic is Corolla at £130. The saving going steel rather than acrylic is 130 minus 126, which is £4. So the answer is £4. Nice and tidy. The trick was disciplined filtering before comparing prices. All right, question 38. We have a pie chart showing 5 outings and a table of possible vote counts. Steam train, adventure playground, farm, museum, and theme park. My job is to check which row could match that pie. Looking at the pie, the theme park is clearly the largest slice, roughly a third of the circle. The adventure and steam train slices are fairly large and similar to one another, a bit smaller than the theme park. The farm is noticeably smaller than those two, and the museum is the smallest slice. A quick strategy: convert each row into percentages of its total and see whether the ordering and rough sizes match the chart. That's much faster than measuring angles. I'll scan the options. Option A, theme about 31%, adventure 25%. Plausible, but steam is only about 19%, while the chart shows steam almost as big as adventure. A also gives farm about 17%, which looks too large compared with the chart. So A feels off. Option C, theme 32.5%, adventure 27.5%, steam 22.5%. Those look a bit high for steam adventure, but the big problem is farm 10% and museum 7.5%. The museum slice on the chart is small, but not that tiny, and the farm looks a bit bigger than 10%. So C underestimates the farm. Option E, theme 32%, adventure 24%, steam 21%, farm 13%, museum 9%. That matches the visual ordering and rough proportions. Theme largest, adventure and steam similar, farm noticeably smaller, museum smallest. It's the best fit. So I briefly lean to A because of the theme and adventure sizes, but checking steam and farm proportions showed A's farm is too big and steam too small. Pivoting to E gives consistent percentages for every slice. Final answer, E, the percentages line up with the pie chart. All right, question 39. The passage praises the traditional, rigorous system of punctuation for its precision and laments that current comma use blurs logical links and covers up lazy thinking. The thrust is evaluative. Precision is good. Careless punctuation erodes clarity and thought. From that, the natural takeaway is a prescriptive one. We ought to restore that rigor. Among the options, only school should go back to teaching the traditional system of punctuation. Follows from that stance. The others either speculate about people's motives, make historical claims not mentioned, or leap to broader policy about reintroducing grammar schools, none of which is supported by the passage. So the conclusion that fits the author's argument is C. reteach the traditional system to recover precision and rigor. Final answer, C, because it's the supported prescriptive step implied by the critique of current usage. All right, question 40. We've got a passage arguing that long hours and poor pay are harming home life, stress, illness, damaged marriages, suffering children, and that politicians, by praising strivers and hard-working people, have pushed a glorification of work that's made us miserable. The key move is, political slogans have clearly been effective, leading to this glorification and its harms. What has to be true for that to hold? That those slogans actually influence how people think and behave, shaping norms so that working longer and harder is admired and consequently more accepted. That's the bridge from rhetoric to real-world misery. So the underlying assumption is that political slogans significantly affect people's everyday behavior. That's option B. The others don't need to be true for the argument to work. Whether most employees are satisfied with pay, A, is beside the point. The claim is about harm, not satisfaction. Restructuring the weak, helping the economy, C, is a policy conjecture the passage doesn't commit to. Whether companies could afford shorter hours or better pay, D, is again policy feasibility, not assumed in the criticism. And even though the passage mentions children suffering, it doesn't need the stronger claim that less stressed workers are definitively better parents. E. It only needs that the current work culture harms family life, which is asserted. So the necessary assumption is that slogans shape behavior and norms. B. Final answer, B, because the argument relies on political messaging influencing how people live and work. All right, question 41. We've got an argument that goes like this. Police hold myths about crime at about the same rate as the general public, and they're even more confident in those false beliefs. That's framed as a scientist-practitioner gap, professionals not accepting relevant research. We're told training can permanently reduce this gap. Therefore, police officers need more training. So the conclusion is police need more training. Supported by, they have a gap. And training reduces gaps. What would strengthen this? Ideally, something that either shows the gap has harmful consequences in policing, making training more urgent, or that alternatives like screening at recruitment won't fix it, or that training in this domain is effective for police specifically. Let's test the options. A. Recruitment fails to identify false beliefs in applicants. That hints you can't filter the problem at the door. So training would indeed be necessary. That helps, but only indirectly. B. Most officers don't support the return of capital punishment. That's one myth among several. If anything, it weakens the example used or muddies the waters. Doesn't strengthen the general claim. C. The gap is common in many professions. That's context, not support. It normalizes the problem, rather than arguing for police training in particular. D. Police training is criticized as insufficiently practical. That's orthogonal. The argument is about evidence-based beliefs, not practical drills. Could even cut against the sort of training proposed. E. Officers whose views aren't evidence-based receive more public complaints. That directly links non-evidence-based beliefs to real-world negative outcomes. If the gap leads to harms and training reduces the gap, then the case for more training is stronger. Between A and E, E is clearly the stronger support because it ties the gap to consequences and thus strengthens the need for the proposed remedy. I'll go with E. All right, question 42. We've a little shed with a metal roof and only the 4 wooden walls, door included, to paint. The front is 1 meter wide and 2.5 meters high. The back is 1 meter wide and 2 meters high, and it's 1 meter deep. 3 coats and 4 minutes per square meter. 2 sheds total with 1 20-minute tea break. Looking at the sketch, the roof slopes, so the heights differ front to back. I first thought, are the sides rectangles? But with a sloping top, the side walls are effectively trapezia. The trick is to use the average height for the sides. Let's do areas for one shed. Front, 1 meter times 2.5 meters equals 2.5 meters squared. Back, 1 meter times 2.0 meters equals 2.0 meters squared. Each side, depth 1 meter, height varying from 2.5 to 2.0, so average height, 2.5 plus 2.0 divided by 2 equals 2.25 meters. Area per side equals 1 times 2.25 equals 2.25 meters squared. Two sides give 4.5 meters squared. Total wooden exterior for one shed. 2.5 plus 2.0 plus 4.5 equals 9.0 meters squared. Good, nice round number. 3 coats, 9 times 3 equals 27 meters squared per shed. At 4 minutes per square meter, 27 times 4 equals 108 minutes, which is 1 hour, 48 minutes for one shed. 2 sheds, double it to 216 minutes, i.e. 3 hours, 36 minutes. Add the solitary 20-minute tea break, and we land on 3 hours, 56 minutes. So the neat way was averaging the slope sides rather than fiddling with triangles. Saves time and avoids errors. Final answer, E, 3 hours and 56 minutes. All right, question 43. With a school party of 24 people, 4 teachers and 20 students. Of the students, 8 are 15, so they're children for pricing, and 12 are 16, so they count as adults. So totals, 16 adults, 4 teachers, plus 12 16-year-olds, and 8 children. Looking at the table, individual prices are $30 per adult and $20 per child. There are also 3 multi-person deals. Family, 2 adults plus up to 2 children for $90. Group, 8 people with at least 2 children for $175. Supergroup, any 8 people for $200. First instinct, can we bundle as much as possible because individual totals would be 16 times 30 plus 8 times 20 equals 480 plus 160 equals $640. Far too high. Family tickets look nice. 2 adults plus up to 2 children for $90. That beats paying 2 times 30 plus 2 times 20 equals $100 by $10. But the group ticket is 8 people for $175, which is $21.875 per person. Even cheaper than a fully loaded family at $22.50 per head, as long as we can supply at least 2 children in each 8. We've got exactly 24 people. That suggests 3 groups of 8. Do we have the children to satisfy the at least 2 children per group rule? 3 groups need 6 children. We have 8, so yes, we can distribute them, say 2, 3, 3. That would cost 3 times $175 equals $525. Let me just check that mixing family tickets could do better. Suppose 2 group tickets, $350, leave 8 people. We could do 2 family tickets with the remaining 4 adults and 4 children for $180, giving $530, slightly worse. 1 group plus families and individuals clearly goes higher. I get $565. Supergroup at $200 is simply dominated by $175. So the neat partition into 3 qualifying group tickets is optimal. Total $525. Therefore, the least amount they must pay is $525. We are given a band of 6 rectangular faces in the order 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, with the 2 hexagonal ends attached to the same rectangular face labeled 1, one hexagon on the edge above 1, the other on the edge below 1. To form the identical prism, any candidate net must reproduce that cyclic order of lateral faces around the prism and must place the 2 hexagons so that, after the band is wrapped, They become the two hexagonal ends attached to the same lateral face, face 1. Why C is the correct choice? Look at the arrangement in C. The three squares 6, 1, 2 appear in a straight line, bottom row, and the three squares 3, 4, 5 appear in a straight line above them. If you follow the band 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2 around the shape in C, you obtain exactly the same cyclic sequence as the original net, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, just starting at a different place in the cycle. That means the lateral faces will meet in the same neighbor relationships when wrapped. The hexagon marked T in C is attached on the edge that lies above the central square 1, matching the original where T is attached to the top edge of face 1. The other hexagon, B, is positioned so that when the band is folded around, bringing face 6 next to face 1 and closing the cycle, it becomes the hexagonal end attached to the opposite edge of face 1. In other words, the net in C places the two end hexagons on the correct edges of the band, so that, after wrapping, they are attached to opposite edges of the same lateral face 1, exactly as in the given net. No other option preserves both the required cyclic order of the lateral faces and the relative placement orientation of the two hexagonal ends. Some alternatives either reverse or permute the neighbor relationships, or place the hexagons on edges that would attach to a different lateral face once folded. Therefore, option C reproduces the original prism exactly. It is the only candidate with the correct ordering and hexagon attachments. All right. Question 45. Weave a passage about Fukushima, mass evacuation due to radiation risk, and a claim that the psychological harms of long-term evacuation may outweigh the physical risks. The author cites Chernobyl, where reduced life expectancy among evacuees stemmed mostly from depression, alcoholism, and suicide rather than radiation-induced cancer. Then we're told scientists disagree on what counts as a safe level of radiation. And, crucially, there's a prescriptive line. People who wish to return should be allowed to. So, what's the main conclusion? We're looking for the author's central recommendation, with the rest serving as support. The Chernobyl evidence is clearly offered as a reason. The point about massive disagreement among scientists functions as another supporting consideration, softening the authority of restrictive safety thresholds and nudging the decision toward personal choice. And the line about psychological harms being more significant reads like an intermediate conclusion that sets up the policy recommendation. Now to the options. A claims cancer risks have been exaggerated, too strong, and not stated. B, about lack of consensus on safe radiation, is a premise, not the endpoint. C, reduced life expectancy among evacuees is the Chernobyl evidence, again, a premise. E, that psychological harms may be worse than radiation is that intermediate claim, still supporting the policy. D captures the policy conclusion. People should be allowed to decide for themselves about living in the affected area. Exactly the thrust of people who wish to return should be allowed to. So the main conclusion is D, because the passage marshals evidence and uncertainty to justify allowing return by choice.
Isn't he great? Arthur's your very own Oxbridge tutor, built by real tutors who've guided hundreds of applicants into Oxford and Cambridge. He doesn't just know what makes a good candidate. He knows what makes an exceptional one. You've already learned from him here. Imagine what happens when he's guiding you directly. Interview slots fill quickly before the season starts, so don't wait. Book your session now at arthurtutoring.co.uk.
All right, question 46. The cake claim is a neat chain of necessary conditions. Tasty only if fresh, fresh only if market. So tasty implies market. We're told we didn't go to the market, so by contrapositive, the cake won't be tasty. Structure: A, B, C, not C, therefore not A. Let's scan the options for that pattern. Chained necessities, leading to a contrapositive. A says, happy only if healthy. Healthy requires vegetables. You eat vegetables, therefore happy. That's affirming the consequent. Wrong direction. B is a simple either-or, no chain of necessities. C has candle, light, can read. Can read, therefore candle. Again, affirming the consequent. D. Listening to loud music, damaged hearing. Hearing is fine, therefore didn't listen. That's a valid contrapositive, but it's a single link, not a chain. Tempting, but the original uses two linked necessities. E. Good knowledge is necessary for fixing the car. Fix knowledge. Without fixing, you won't arrive on time. Arrive on time, fix. Chain them. Arrive on time, fix, knowledge. We're told we lack knowledge, so not arrive on time. That's exactly the same form as the cake. A, B, C. Not C, so not A. So while D matches the contrapositive move, E mirrors both the chain structure and the move. The best parallel is E. Final answer, E, because it uses a chain of necessary conditions and concludes via the contrapositive of that chain. All right, question 47. We've got an argument about private medicine. Since money exists to buy advantages, and people are morally entitled to use their money to benefit themselves and their families, there can be no objection to private healthcare. In other words, if a practice simply reflects the legitimate use of personal wealth to secure advantages for oneself and one's loved ones, it's morally permissible. So I'm looking for an option that applies that same principle. A policy or claim justified because wealth is rightly used to confer significant benefits on one's family. Option A is about not wasting inherited wealth, more a prudential sermon than a principle about the legitimacy of buying advantages. B says foreign holidays are good due to tourism spillovers, utilitarian benefits to others, not a claim about entitlement to use wealth for family advantages. C moves to talent and duty. That's a different moral domain entirely. D urges redistribution, the opposite direction of the passage's permissive stance. E argues inheritance tax should be low so children inherit enough to substantially improve their lives. That is precisely the same structure. People may use and transfer wealth to secure advantages for their loved ones. Thus, policy should permit that effect. So the best illustration of the principle is E. Final answer, E, because it defends a policy on the ground that people are entitled to use their wealth to confer significant advantages on their families. All right, question 48. We have a sourdough that begins Monday at 8 p.m. with 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water, so 100 grams in total. Every morning at 8 o'clock, the baker doubles the total weight by adding equal weights of flour and water. And the water loses 1 gram an hour, so 24 grams in a day. The recipe needs 500 grams, and we must leave 50 grams afterwards, so we need at least 550 grams on the day we use it. My first impulse is to see how the total evolves day by day, keeping flour and water separate, because only the water falls by 24 grams between mornings. Start Monday, 8 o'clock. F equals 50, W equals 50, total 100 grams. From Monday 8 o'clock to Tuesday 8 o'clock, the water loses 24 grams. So before Tuesday's feeding, we have F equals 50, W equals 26, total 76. To double that total, we must add half of 76, 38 grams, as flour and 38 grams as water. After Tuesday's feed, F equals 88, W equals 64. Total 152 grams. Repeat the same routine. By Wednesday 8 o'clock, water equals 64 minus 24 equals 40. Total before feed equals 88 plus 40 equals 128. Add 64 grams of flour and 64 grams of water. Total 256 grams after Wednesday feed. By Thursday 8 o'clock, water equals 104 minus 24 equals 80. Total before feed equals 152 plus 80 equals 232. Add 116 grams each. Total 464 grams after Thursday feed. By Friday 8 o'clock, water equals 196 minus 24 equals 172. Total before feed equals 268 plus 172 equals 440. After Friday's doubling, we add 220 grams each. Total becomes 880 grams. So the first morning, when the total reaches at least 550 grams, is Friday, after the Friday 8 o'clock feeding. I briefly wondered if the doubling might have happened immediately on Monday, which would have given an earlier date. But the natural reading is that the doubling happens each morning after you've started. So the sequence above is the correct interpretation. Final answer, Friday, because following the day-by-day account, the total first exceeds 550 grams on Friday morning. All right, question 49. We have a 250-gram bag, and the label gives percentage ranges. Almonds 20 to 30%, Brazil nuts 10 to 20%, hazelnuts 5 to 15%, peanuts 30 to 40%, and pecans 10 to 20%. Looking at this table, the key is that I eat all the almonds, and I learned the almond content was as small as it could be, while still consistent with the labeling. My immediate thought is, smallest it could be, means the almond percentage is at its lower bound. 20% of 250 grams. That's 0.20 times 250 equals 50 grams of almonds eaten, leaving 250 minus 50 equals 200 grams in the bag. Peanuts originally must be between 30% and 40% of 250 grams, i.e. between 75 grams and 100 grams. After I remove the 50 grams of almonds, the peanut mass is unchanged. The peanut percentage in the remaining bag is peanut mass divided by 200 grams. To maximize that percentage, we should maximize peanut mass, so take the peanuts at their upper label limit, 100 grams. That gives 100 divided by 200 equals 0.50, which is 50%. A quick check for feasibility. The other three nut types, Brazil, hazelnut, pecan, must together make up the remaining 100 grams. Since 250 minus 50 minus 100 equals 100, their individual label ranges in grams are Brazil 25 to 50 grams, hazelnut 12.5 to 37.5 grams, pecan 25 to 50 grams. Their minima sum to 62.5 grams and maxima to 137.5 grams. So it's easy to choose values that sum to 100 grams. For example, Brazil 50 grams, hazelnuts 12.5 grams, pecans 37.5 grams. So almonds at 50 grams and peanuts at 100 grams is consistent with all labels. I briefly checked larger answers, 57% or 60%. Those would require more than 100 grams of peanuts, or fewer than 50 grams of almonds, both impossible under the label constraints. So the largest possible peanut content remaining is 50%. Final answer, C, 50%. Label the 6 squares along the snake-shaped net in order. V, 3, 6, 2, 1, 4. When that kind of 6-square zigzag net is folded into a cube, the faces that are 3 places apart in the chain become opposite faces. So the opposite pairs are V opposite 2, 3 opposite 1, 6 opposite 4. A valid folded cube cannot show any 2 opposite faces on adjacent faces of the model. Now check the 5 choices. A shows 3 and 1 on adjacent faces. But 3 and 1 are opposite on the net, so A is impossible. B shows V adjacent to 2. V and 2 are opposite on the net, so B is impossible. C shows 3 adjacent to 1, again opposite pair, so C is impossible. E shows 3 adjacent to 1, opposite pair, so E is impossible. D contains none of the opposite pairs on adjacent faces, so it is the only configuration consistent with the net. Therefore, D is the only cube that could be made from the given net.